Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Good morning. What's left of the morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the invitation to come out and speak. Before we get started, let me just kind of put out there that this is really intended to be a discussion. We're going to talk about law enforcement in the cyber world, and like the title of the presentation says, if your organization has been involved with law enforcement, there's a good likelihood that they will, either as a victim or as a partner, or as any number of reasons. So we hope that you'll ask questions, we hope you'll engage with us, and we'll promise you that we'll get you out before the other two sections, so you'll be first in line for Chick-fil-A. My name is Brian. I am the supervisor here in the Augusta office. So I supervise a team of agents both in Augusta and Statesboro. I cover about 26 counties. We also have in the room, fortunately, Todd Renner. He supervises one of the cyber squads in Atlanta. He didn't realize I was going to point him out, but it is great that he's here, because the way the FBI, and I'll talk about this in just a few minutes, we're organized geographically, but also by function. So there's a reason that he and I coordinate almost on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, to help provide support for the cyber community here in Augusta. And with that, I'll let Mike introduce himself, and then we'll get started.
So good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Opacity. I work for ADP. I'm the Senior Director for Fraud Detection and Strategy. Prior to that, I ran 24/7 incident response and detection for ADP. And before that, I was involved with DoD for a while. Most of you, there's a lot of people in the room knew me at various parts of my career. I want to remind everybody that even though Brian and I have roles and we have employers, we are speaking here as ourselves. And even if our employer should happen to agree with us, that's nothing we can control.
It's very important that was caught on. If I say something stupid, I don't want to be fired. All right, so we'll get started. Let's kind of talk briefly.
Really?
Maybe.
All right, so question, who is law enforcement? When do you deal with law enforcement? Law enforcement generally just divided into three types of organizations. Federal, you've got obviously FBI, you've got Secret Service, and then almost every federal agency has some law enforcement component associated with it. I think there's even one for the Department of Education. They go down to state. This is kind of a Georgia focus, but in Georgia, you have the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. In some states, you're going to find you have state police agencies that fill that role. And then at the local level, you have a county sheriff or a police department. You have some sort of superior court organization that's going to deal with local crimes, state crimes, and then federal crimes. And this is important because when you decide you're going to involve law enforcement, who can help you? Who's available? Who's going to have interest in your case? You know, who can drive down and actually visit your site if that's necessary, or visit the site where the crime occurred, or visit the data center where the crime occurred. So there's lots of nuance to this.
And it's important for us as law enforcement that we also, we work with the FBI, I work with everybody on that list very closely. So when we talk to you all about reaching out to law enforcement, it's not, certainly there's certain things that we definitely want you to reach out to the FBI first, but we're never going to discourage you from reaching out to the locals if you have that relationship already established. It's incumbent on me in my office to make sure I then have those partnerships with the local law enforcement or the GBI, that they know, hey, this may be larger than something we can handle, or this may not be jurisdictionally something that we're able to help with. So then they would come to me, and then we would assist them as well. So this is just kind of just to let you know there's a large law enforcement population. But you should build those partnerships at all levels if you can. So it gets a little tricky in the federal system. You hear about a lot of different organizations. I mean, there's a lot of organizations, in fact, DoD, NSA here locally that you hear about, and you know they're involved in cyber warfare, cyber threats. So what do they actually do, and how do we work together? It's not as simple, and this is probably a difficult chart to read, but I'll kind of explain it to you in simple terms. DHS is more on the protection side, infrastructure. They try to mitigate and recover. DOD, NSA, that's the national security side, obviously. They're the war fighters, offense and defensive protection of the United States. They do a lot more international. And then you have the FBI, DOJ. We're more about attribution. If we have victims here in the United States, trying to figure out where that victimization came from, identify who the bad actors are. If it's something we can prosecute, then working directly with DOJ so that we can either get some sort of restitution or criminal prosecution on those individuals. That's a very broad brush. That's how the federal kind of system works. And I'm not going to read this. We have the cyber mission for the FBI is broad. The biggest thing we're trying to do is bring world-class capabilities so that we can basically take bad actors and try to prevent them from hitting us in the United States. We can't always prosecute folks. I mean, a lot of times, and this is obviously an unclassified briefing, so I can't go into a lot of detail about nation states or some of the things that they're doing, but where we can't prosecute, we want to try to deter. And we bring a lot of resources. We have a tremendous team of folks, both in Atlanta and then locally, that will work with your organization to try to identify and try to prevent these crimes before they happen so that you cannot become a victim. But if you are, we also give you mechanisms to try to recover and prosecute. So the FBI is kind of structured. We have 56 field offices throughout the United States. Georgia's covered by one field office, that's Atlanta. But there's 14 resident agencies. Like Mark talked about the Augusta office. The reason why we have these resident agencies is so you can build these personal relationships with the folks in a local geography. So my goal is to know everybody in here so you guys can see my name if something comes up, if you become a victim of a crime and it's cyber related. I want you to be able to call me. I want you to be able to reach out to the local FBI. If I can't handle it locally, if it's something that's above the capabilities, and we do have cyber agents here that are very capable, but if it's something that we can't handle, we have the resources of the Atlanta division. We also have our headquarters element. And if you look at this map, those are our offices across the world. We have legal attaches. So if there's a bad actor in another country, we have the ability to reach back to those countries and try to work with their law enforcement to get whatever prosecution or recovery we can do. So, in these cases, they move very fast. So we have to have this flexibility and have to have these resources already in place to have any chance to be able to make the recoveries. So what can you expect from us? I mean, this is really the big question. People are always reluctant. The thing that we find within law enforcement, especially the FBI, is a lot of times victims don't want to come to us because they're worried about, is it going to look bad for them? Is this going to be, are we just looking to put it on TV? Are we going to publicize this? And that's not the case. We're going to make every effort to help the victim. And that's minimizing downtime, minimizing the time that your organization is not operational, because clearly that's going to be your number one priority. How long, if you get hit by ransomware or something that shuts your network down, we're going to try to get in there. We're going to try to collect evidence, but we're going to try to do it in a way that minimizes your exposure, but also your downtime. We're also going to make every effort to work with you in terms of media relationships. Not every case is going to make the news, but obviously some, like Colonial Pipeline was one recently, and I know Todd has worked a number of big cases where as soon as they happen, they could have national implications. So we're going to work with your folks to try to minimize any kind of publicity that you're not looking for. We also want to keep the victims informed. What we do throughout our investigation is work with whatever level of the organization you want us to, whether that's the CIO level or the implementation level. We'll make sure that we're talking to them and we're keeping them informed of the actions that we're doing and what we're seeing. And then the only negative that we do have is a lot of times our cases can be lengthy. Most FBI federal cases, they're not quick turn operations. They take a lot of resources and they can tend to be long. So we try to keep you informed throughout that, but some of them can last several years if that's how long it takes to get the results we're looking for.
Okay. I keep getting off. I just think the computer doesn't like me. Okay, so one of the important things to remember when you have a cyber event that takes place on your premises is that there's actually 3 locations that are in play. There's the data center where the malicious activity occurred. There's where the victim of the crime, if you have a financial crime in particular, if that victim was in another jurisdiction, and also the location of the criminal, if you can determine that. So all three of those positions are in play, and any of the law enforcement agencies in those areas can be called on by you to try and support you in investigating and possibly prosecuting a crime.
Has anybody had an example where law enforcement has to come into your organization? We have to ask a couple questions so we can give out prizes. So raise your hand. Go ahead, sir. What was you said it was?
CP.
Oh, child pornography. Yeah, and that's one of the ways that Mark and I ran into each other. Yeah, it wasn't.
It's okay. It's okay. Mark's out
it's okay,
now.
Mark. He's out now. It's enough. No, it was an example of where we identified something on his network, and we actually they had a large network that large corporate network, and they had a large footprint.
Okay, so
It's not unusual that we may come to you without you coming to us. If we see something on your network through our investigative access or tools, or some other victim might identify it, we may come to you and say, hey, we see something, and hopefully you'll work with us to try to determine what that is. And that's where the crime scene becomes very important.
okay, so a couple things. You have to understand all law enforcement agencies have jurisdictions. FBI's jurisdictions and authorities are national and possibly international through their legal attaches. They are not the same. Agencies have different cyber capabilities. They have different abilities to assist you. We all watch the TV, and we see the wonderful, grab an image of a drive as they slap something on top of a hard drive. 10 seconds later, they're done. They've got it. They're running out the room. That's not real. You have some agencies that cannot really actively support cyber. Some people who are world class. So you're going to see differing capabilities. Again, we talked a little bit about federal crimes those are United States Code, those are the FBI, U.S. Federal Court. GBI can actually go to either state or federal court. And then, of course, your local district attorney is going to probably charge state crimes in a state court. So there's different, if you're dealing with a federal crime, if you're dealing with a state crime, there's different agencies that can both, report it and prosecute it. They are all fully engaged. They're all busy. They all have limited resources. So there's going to come times when you knock on the door and they might say, yeah, that's a real great problem. Maybe you should call this guy. So be prepared if that's what happens. Not so much in the kind of cases that Brian's alluding to, where you've got active ransomware, you've got an active intrusion, active compromise. But if you're dealing with more financial crime, or if you're dealing with a more of a financial loss situation, sometimes you have to actually go to a couple of different law enforcement agencies until you find someone who's got the time, resources, and ability to prosecute it.
The very first cyber case that was prosecuted in the Southern District of Georgia about 10 years ago. It was when I first brought it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. It seemed like a pretty low dollar value case, and they were interested because it was new, it was cyber. Because the dollar value was fairly low, they weren't super excited about it. But when we started to dig into what the actual cost of the crime was, and it got over several $100,000, then you can get. So I say that if your organization is struck by, if you're victimized as part of a criminal act, don't just look at the amount of the ransomware. Look at what did they defeat, the amount of resources that you utilized, what you had to replace in order to protect yourself, the client damage that you might have had. So there's other areas that you can look at. In this particular case, it was just a matter of a former employee had logged in surreptitiously and grabbed a bunch of proposals and then underbid them. Well, also lost business was one of the victimization. So think outside of the box, and those things will get your local prosecutors, whether it's state, local, or federal. They'll get them interested, and it all because it helps It's not always worth it to go through a year of trial for a 6-month sentence or a probationary sentence. But if you go through a lot of work and you can get somebody some true, penalties, that makes it more. It's a little more. You get a little more out of it. So think outside the box when it comes to what the actual victimization is.
So at this point, what can you do today if you haven't had an engagement with law enforcement, what can you do to make your life a little bit simpler? Well, it's hard to call somebody you've never talked to, or, call the front door and say, "Hi, FBI, I've got a problem. What are you going to do?" It's a lot easier to call, "Hey, Brian, this is what just happened. And, how do I get support? Who do I talk to? How do we move forward?" And the easiest way to do that from a corporate perspective is look for outreach opportunities. Infragard is FBI's outreach program for critical infrastructure. There is a chapter in Atlanta. There's actually a subchapter in Augusta. So if you join the Atlanta chapter and you're in this area, put on the bottom in the notes field Augusta, and you will actually join our organization, which is just standing up right now. It's great because it gives you an opportunity to go ask questions of the federal government, ask questions of the FBI, get some access to what resource they can make available. Other things they can possibly do is maybe deliver a threat brief targeted for your area. Do you know what the problems are in the area of your building, in the area of your data centers, all of those questions that can be addressed by asking the right people. And again, if time and resources are available, they can do a threat brief, they can talk about general threat, and this is fantastic for you because it allows you to begin to do some targeting in terms of threats you want to be able to mitigate or risk you want to reduce. It's also wonderful when your auditors come around and they say, "Well, what have you done to kind of understand what's going on in your area?" Well, we talked to the FBI, and they've delivered this particular idea and concept of current threat, and we've addressed that in our program, and we believe that we have reduced the risk to our operations. So that's some of the benefits, some of the ways you can do it. I don't know if you take people knocking on the door or calling you just saying, "Hey."
We're very excited about the new Infragard chapter. It's actually only one of 2 satellite chapters in the U.S., us and Guam. It's because cyber is so important to this area. So if you're interested in that, if that's something you want to be a part of, if you want to ask the presentation, I can grab your email and we'll make sure you're on the distro list. We had planned on having a kickoff meeting in the next, really we're talking about September, October, but because of the Delta variant, some of DOJ's policy prevented that. But as soon as we're allowed to, we're going to have a kickoff meeting at the Cyber Center. It'll be an in-person and virtual. And I think that the benefit of that organization here locally, because we're a smaller community, but we're very cyber focused, will allow you to have some real good personal contacts, but also access to the national level threats. Yes, sir. That's a great question. You're absolutely right. People are scared to reach out to us for a couple reasons. One is that disruption to the business, and the other one is what's it going to look like to the corporate brand? Is it going to negatively impact the image of their business? And I can tell you, we work very hard to minimize both of those. I can't always, I can't guarantee, the brand issue. I mean, if it comes out, like if you see on the brand, everybody knows Colonial Pipeline now, and who talked about Colonial Pipeline until they got hit with ransomware and shut down gas or made gas prices go up? I mean, nobody probably, but so I can't guarantee that their image, because some things are outside of our control. However, the disruption, we will work everything. And if you have a company that you're working with, not everybody has their own, staff in-house. So if there's a corporation that you're working with that does your protection, we'll work directly with them. We'll try to work off the backups. We'll try to work off just the section that's maybe been that has the malware or the problem. Whatever we can do to get you back up and running as quickly as possible is what we're going to try to do. Todd, you want to add anything to that? I mean, you've worked. I mean, we do the best we can. I mean, it's not always easy, but our goal, we don't do any. It's no value to you if we just re-victimize you. Keep you down for several hours or days. Yes, sir. Not an obligation. There are now. It depends on what's taken. If they've got client victimization where people's personal data has been stolen, there are regulations that control what they have to notify in terms of their sub-victims. But corporates don't have to come. They don't have to come to us. They can get something and deal with it themselves. And we hope that doesn't happen because we can't prevent it if we don't know it's happening. And we have, and I can speak mostly for the FBI, but also in working with Secret Service and DHS, and we have great capabilities, but we have to be able to utilize those. And if the corporations don't come to us and tell us, or they come to us 6 months after the fact, once they've realized that maybe they did have personal information get stolen and now they have an obligation, it's too late for us to really do anything about it. So the idea is to encourage everybody to come to us immediately so that we can start to work proactively, maybe even get on the network and start to track some of that stuff while it's still being active. It gives us a better chance at success.
If you have a cyber event, if you think about it, you've got a last IP that came at you. So if it was a cloud service provider or some other form of hosting provider, that really doesn't tell you much. But you can't exactly call them. They can actually serve subpoenas. They can start working that hop backwards, but you can only do that while the logs are available. So time is of the essence if you want to start working that kind of thing backwards.
And your question is actually very relevant to this email right here. So this is kind of an example of an email that might have been received. It's kind of a precursor to a larger attack. Hey, if you just give us some Bitcoins and pay us now, we'll prevent. But this is an example. If a corporation gets something like this and doesn't notify us, personally, I think that's not successful for me for making the outreach, but also for the corporation. Because at this level, if you get something like this that says, hey, we're planning a bigger attack, we're actively on your network right now, this would give us a great opportunity to go in and try to identify it and prevent it. Now, the question has come up, and I've heard this before, is are we going to make ourselves a bigger target if we go to law enforcement? And I can't say that you won't, but you also might make yourself not worth the effort. If they know you're going to go to the FBI or law enforcement, then they may go target somebody that's not going to do that. The last victim we had locally that got hit with ransomware, the owner came right to us, told us about it, and he made one of the best comments I've ever heard. He said, I'd rather build my network back up from zero than pay these guys $1. So that's the kind of attitude we want to try to hopefully instill in everybody so that you'll feel comfortable coming to us with this. Talk a little about ransomware. 30 minutes goes by so quick. The other big issue that we see a lot is business email compromise, and this is critical. If you're a victim of business email compromise, and you notify IC3.gov, which is the Internet Crime Complaints Center, you can immediately there's a kill chain that works that will immediately try to set some things in motion to activate stopping the transfer of funds. If you wait 48 hours to do that, the chance of getting those funds recovered becomes almost, I don't want to say zero, but they become a lot less likely. But if you identify an email compromise where somebody has reallocated funds to a different account and you notify them through IC3, there is a really good process in place amongst the government that will try to stop the transfer of funds. It's no guarantee. I mean, we had one recently where they caught it pretty quick and they still, didn't get all of their money back. But if you get $500,000 stolen and you get $400,000 back, that's better than losing $500,000, I would think. So yeah, and Atlanta is number one for this risk. I don't know why that is the case. We're trying very hard to get the word out, but a lot of times it's just education of your staff, making sure they don't fall for login tricks, or the bank should know not to transfer money through email, change of accounts. But we still see billions and billions of dollars being defrauded this way. So
it's very low cost. It's actually no cost. All they do is they create a forged email. They send it to somebody, for example, your payroll administrator, saying, "Hey, I just changed my bank account. You need to make the update. Oh, make it effective immediately, please." It happened to me. It happened to another gentleman sitting in the room, and we laughed because it's my job. I chase that particular kind of fraud. For it to happen to me, for them to pick me, was the most fun I've had with a fraudster in years.
If your organization is hit with a business email compromise and you've lost money, you should do two things. You should go to IC3.gov and you should call the local FBI. You should do those two things immediately. That is your best chance of any kind of recovery. Yes, sir. You probably answer that better than I can, because
Good. I don't have a microphone, so I'm trying to speak loud, but for the regulator, we don't report to regulators at all. So when you report it to us, whether hypothetical, we're happy to have those conversations as well. I have a friend at the company, Ryan with X. We're happy to have those conversations. There's no magic pause button, but we don't report to regulators. And we could certainly work with, depending on the industry you're in, we can work with those regulators to say, hey, listen, company X reported to us. We would like to work together to make sure we could do any operational necessary attribution pieces there.
because there's definitely things we can do on our end that may, if you're actively being attacked, we want to get in there while it's happening. So I think the answer is yes, but it's probably on a case by. We don't want to make a blanket statement and say we hit the pause button, but we can certainly work with you to facilitate it if there's a reason why we want to do that.
Hey,
If it
Brian.
helps the investigation.
We're bingo on time, so why don't we just open the floor for questions and get rid of
Okay.
whatever
Yeah, I
guests
mean
we have.
we want to get you to Chick-fil-A. So
In the back, please, last row. That's a great question. So from a corporate perspective, your contact to law enforcement is something that you need to organize, and you need to have everybody engaged. You need to have the team built that includes your corporate counsel. You're going to want to know, the executive board's going to want to be involved. If you have a crisis communications team that keeps the critical portions of your company informed, they're going to all want to know what's going on, what's the next step. They're going to want to know what information they have to release. Is there a requirement to notify regulators? What customer notifications have to take place, if any? So there's a lot of people that when this event happens that are going to want to be engaged from a corporate side. And this is something you can make your life a lot easier if you tabletop it, if you exercise it, so that you understand how you have to work together. It's not just all pure play law enforcement. There's a lot of work needs to be done on the corporate side.
I'll caveat that with when you reach out to us and get a threat brief, and we're happy to do them. I would include your practitioners, but also your executive level, and include your attorneys, because I think when they hear and see the bigger picture, they get more involved. We definitely want to get them involved early on, because they can slow down and shut down investigations where they're trying to be helpful, but they're just causing it to be delayed. And a lot of times, if we don't act fast, the chances of success become a lot less likely. So I would get them on board very early, invite them to the meetings with us prior to, and invite them as soon as you're meeting with law enforcement, have them part of the conversation.
We have anything left to give away?
Mark had all the giveaways. I don't know. Do we have some more good gifts for the people asking questions? I gave them all to one person. Winner!
Yes, sir.
I misunderstood what you said.
I had a slide on that, and I deleted it because I thought we were talking mostly about the liaison side of things. But evidence is collected by law enforcement. It's not collected by system administrators. That being said, collect according to best practices. Preserve logs. Preserve your regular business reporting. That's going to be best evidence that you can provide to law enforcement. Preserve state to the extent possible. If you have a compromised machine, collect memory, collect hard drive, all that stuff. All that best practice is critical. If you can put it in an envelope and seal it and say this is sealed up and here's the image, that's even better because now you have a physical hard drive, you can say, which matches the actual image that you're actually doing work against, or you can give copies away if you have to. So that's best answer I can give you. I think.
No, I think that's good. I mean, the evidence is what it is. What you give us is going to be the evidence. We'll come over, we'll sign once you give it to us, we'll establish the chain of custody for it, and then it's, you know, in our lane, and we'll protect it as we do any piece of evidence. But I think Mike's right. I mean, you do your best practices. Anything you give us is going to be helpful. We're going to ask for any logs, any data that you have, any screenshots, anything that you might have collected through the process, and then once you give it to us, then it becomes evidence.
Yep.
Yes.
So security researchers are pretty big on, giving back to the community in terms of not just protecting their own company, but protecting others as well. So let's say theoretically you see something that's not impacting your company or your clients, but could impact another. What's the best way to kind of give that information to you guys?
That's a great question. We want anything, even if you're not, you say you catch something before you become a victim, we still might be interested in that. We collect a lot of intelligence that we can, either if it's, maybe it's nation state stuff, it might be on the classified, we might provide that to some of our classified partners, or if it's something that can help everybody in Infragard, we might put it out there so they can see that vulnerability and make that patch. So just like everything else we've discussed, if you see something like that, the best thing to do is reach out to your local FBI office or whoever, Secret Service, DHS, whoever you're the most comfortable with. But absolutely, we're very interested in that.
We're in the way of lunch at this
All right.
point.
Enjoy your lunch. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time and attention.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.